overseas to friends and family, but also nice in a kind of, I thought it would appeal to you with your econ hat on, because it's one of those examples as how the market doesn't work when you don't have full information.
And how will will it also apply to? There's obviously a lot of Australians transfer money overseas. Well, not migrants.
Yeah.
But rather than say a foreign student who might be here and sending and receiving money.
Yeah. No.
But it would apply to everyone who's sending money abroad.
Absolutely. Aid agencies are being stung at the moment, so they're finding it tough to send overseas. I don't know, Sarah, do you have a sort of choice perspective on who's getting stung at the moment on the current system?
At the moment, it certainly is. Migrant communities are sending significant amounts of money overseas, and as you've said, they can least afford to be stung with these sorts of hidden or confusing fees and costs. But my understanding of the proposal is it will apply to anyone who's sending money overseas across the board.
Andrew, have you heard as part of the consultations that you guys have done that people are using unregistered or unorthodox means of transferring money?
Bitcoin, and then the worst is people who are actually taking physical banknotes on the planes. So there's one organisation that was physically shipping cash over. And airline travel is stressful enough without having sort of thousands of dollars in your bank.
And the declarations and all of that.
Yeah, exactly. If you do more than $10,000, you've got to declare it. But then you're just walking through with this money, burning a hole in your pocket, because the system's broken.
Well, I mean, I know for a fact because a big part of the migrant community is because of these high fees. They're actually going to these, people that they know that will transfer money for you.
Yeah.
You give them cash over here, and they will meet your relative or someone in the other country.
You can have a clean one rather than scribble on whatever.
Good. I have one.
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
And you've, can we hand out the fact sheet too?
Yes, I just haven't got staples, unfortunately.
I think that's all right.
What about, has this got anything to do with the Banking Royal Commission?
Well, big banks are among those who are misbehaving. So there was one of them who came before the House of Reps Economics Committee, and that was all great, was quizzing the CEO on why they were saying we will transfer money over. What were they saying? When transferring money overseas by the internet, we charge a fee of $20. And Matthew's quote was like, you don't really charge a fee of $20, do you? You charge a flat fee of $20, and then you have an exchange rate spread. And so they'll have to play, and they're benefiting from bamboozling their customers.
And how, obviously the exchange rate changes every day, for many times a day. So what point will the marker be? How will you decide what that rate, what you call the mid-market rate? Is that set once a day or once a week?
The mid-market rate fluctuates. We'd work through some of those implementation details of the ACCC as to whether it makes more sense to kind of do daily updating of prices rather than require real time. But I don't think that's beyond the wit of the ACCC to sort out. And whichever way you go, it's better than customers thinking that they're not that all they're paying is a flat fee.
Is there any estimate? I haven't read the press release. Is there any estimate of what this? What the fee gouging in these various ways, both exchange rate spreads and also fees, how much they add up to? So
the best way of taking it is to take annual remittances, which is $16 billion, and then you can work out the total cost. So the best estimate we have is that an Australian gets charged 7.7%. So 7.7% of $16 billion is more than $1 billion. Obviously that fee wouldn't fall to zero, but say it fell to the American level, then that's a 2.3% reduction, which is a couple of $100 million. And even if it fell to the Canadian level, you're still talking 0.4% reduction, which when you've got $16 billion is tens of millions of dollars of benefit. But we think you get hundreds of millions of dollars into the pockets of some of the poorest Australians and their families overseas.
And who do you think is making the most of that $1 billion at the moment? Is it the banks?
They're doing a lot of the transfer. We haven't been able to get a good breakdown of bank and non-bank remittance providers. They do a lot of sort of chunky transactions. So if someone wants to move to Fiji, for example, and move their wealth to Fiji, then often they'll use a big bank to do that. Whereas if they're sending friends, they might well use a kind of corner store provider. Steph, did you want to have a transcript and just do some kind of general formal thing for some of our friends who are
Yes, I'd love to.
not here? I don't want to interrupt Matt's questioning, but I just thought it might be useful for some of those who haven't been around just to have some formal intro from Sam, and then I'll do a quick rundown of the policy and hand over to Mohammed and Sarah if you guys want to say something.
Sure.
Well, I'm rolling, so
Okay.
because we like.
Do you want to do a little intro given?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I'm Sam Crosby. Hi. I'm the candidate for Reid. Reid is overwhelmingly one of Sydney's most multicultural communities. We outstrip just about every index in the country or national average in the country for multiculturalism and migrant communities, who are obviously one of the big beneficiaries from this policy or losers under the current system. So when Andrew told me about this, I thought, what a fantastic idea! What a genuine help for people. So very happy to be here.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, mate.
The basic principle of this policy is that financial institutions shouldn't make money by bamboozling their customers. And right now, when Australians who send money overseas are surveyed, only 1 in 5 realise that in addition to the flat fee, they also pay an exchange rate spread. That exchange rate spread can be big. One study suggests that if you send $1,000 to a developing country, it costs $77, 7.7% eaten up in transaction fees. That's $23 more than people in America pay. It's more than people in Britain and Canada pay. There was a commitment in 2014, the G20 summit, to reduce these costs significantly, but we haven't seen that reduction take place, in part because the market isn't working properly. People just aren't able to shop around because they don't know the true cost of transferring money overseas. So Labor's policy is a simple one. We will require remittance providers to disclose the full cost of transferring money overseas, the flat fee and the exchange rate markup. That'll be done in reference to the mid-market rate, standard exchange rate that's available on Google or Yahoo Finance. The policy's been developed in consultation with money transfer experts and people from the multicultural communities. We've held roundtables in Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, engaging Pacific Islander, Filipino and African community leaders. This is big bucks for some of the poorest Australians. We're talking $16 billion a year being transferred overseas in remittances. To put that in perspective, that's 4 times as much as Australia gives in foreign aid after the significant cuts to Australia's foreign aid program. So this policy is good for transparency, good for productivity, good for competition and good for reducing inequality in Australia and around the world. Mohammed, did you want to say a few words?
Sure. Thank you very much, Andrew, for having us here today. The Federation of Ethnic Communities Council of Australia welcomes this policy announcement by the Australian Labor Party. We believe that it is unfair for banks and financial institutions to charge large and often unclear fees when people transfer money overseas to help their families and loved ones. We believe that the Australian government should adopt the policy that it adopted at the G20 summit, which calls for a flat rate. And we're seeing, because of the current problem, we're seeing many ethnic communities and migrant communities using unorthodox ways of transferring money overseas, unregulated, which is, if God forbid anything happens, there is no protection for them. I think this policy announcement is wonderful because it puts back some confidence in the banking sector and the financial institutions for people to actually use proper financial transfer organisations to organise their international transfers.
Thanks, man. Sarah, did you want to add
Yeah,
from Choice
definitely.
perspective?
So, thank you for having me. Sarah Agar, Head of Campaigns and Policy at Choice. Labor consulted with Choice and other stakeholders in the development of this policy, and we are really happy to welcome today's announcement. When we buy anything, we expect to be given the price in a way that is clear and upfront. We shouldn't be confused, and sending money overseas should be no different. We shouldn't be hit with hidden costs and fees, but at the moment that's not always the case. This policy proposal will make the market fairer and more competitive, allowing people to shop around for the best deal in a way that will be much easier. When people send money overseas to their loved ones, they'll be able to find the best deal now. Choice welcomes this proposal.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Do you think, I mean, obviously, you know, people in the past, I guess people have competed on exchange rate. You know, like you go, if you walk around in the arcades in Sydney, you see, you know, someone will be offering this exchange rate to one another. That's just the exchanging money. Does this sort of create problems for that? Because you'll have to, you know, I mean, is there any implications for those who are changing other types of, doing other sorts of currency exchange?
So Matt, I'd hope that we would see that same sort of competition happening in the online space. You'd have a market which is working the way markets ought to work, where people see the posted prices and they're able to compete to get the best deal. The great thing about competition is when you've got well-informed consumers, you end up seeing those margins fall significantly. That'll be a benefit for not only people sending remittances overseas, but Australians travelling overseas. Aid agencies at the moment are being stung by excess remittance costs. There are indeed some providers who are showing already full fee transparency, like TransferWise is an example of one that does this. But there's many that don't, and they include the big banks, one of whom recently claimed to its customers, when transferring money overseas by the internet, we charge a fee of $20, and completely failed to mention the exchange rate markup.
Why is it so hard to get a breakdown of who's doing this? You know, like you're saying it was difficult to work out who's actually providing these services.
Yeah, data on remittances isn't as good as we'd like, and making sure we've got sort of a better handle on the underlying figures is important. But we certainly know that those affected are among the most vulnerable in the community, and those who are benefiting from the current confusing, opaque system among the most profitable financial institutions, or include the most profitable financial institutions in the land.
So, Flavor, what's the plan? Is there any timing on this, like when you'd introduce it if you were to win government?
We'd aim to move speedily on it under a shortened government. We think it's really important for consumers and for ethnic communities. It's been a major issue that's come up in the roundtables, and it's one where we're keen to see the market working properly for the benefit of all Australians.
Okay.
Sorry, wasn't meaning to make that overly formal, but just useful for those who can't join us here.
I'm sorry, I apologise. I couldn't find the place. That's why I've been running around. My name is Jeff Casares. I represent the Community Council, and I'm also the treasurer of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of Australia. So this thing is very interesting. As far as concerned, we will support whatever the Liberal Party does.
Oh, thank you.
If, of course, get the government, it will be even easier.
Indeed, indeed. These things are always easier.
Actually, I used to remember. So.
Absolutely.
Tony knows me very well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah. So, I'll take a report to the Archdiocese, of course, and the ECC, we can hopefully use email, whatever you like, you know.
Wonderful.
Our organizations, we have more than 600 organizations, and we were established in 1975. We are the umbrella organization in New South Wales, and I am one of the original members, and when I did, so I'm very familiar.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Well, if there weren't other questions, I know Steph was keen to shoot a little bit of video with anyone who's happy to be on camera, just talking about the policies. We're just after sort of very short grabs, but again, something that we can sort of pass out to those organisations that weren't able to join us today.
People are good at keeping their comments to 30 seconds. I know it's.
Which I'm hopeless at, but I'm sure you guys are all better than me at doing this. It's always hard to sum things up quickly.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, no worries.
Sorry I
Thanks.
wasn't here to
I'll,
greet you and say
That's
hello.
all right. No worries.
I'll just give you this card as well. For the benefit of
Yeah,
listeners.
thank you.
So whoever wants to make some comment, I might